My name is Francisco Reed. I am 30 years old and I live in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
Ooh. Happy.
Good morning. You want to go night-night? Let's go night-night. I was brought to the United States when I was 10 years old. I was born in Veracruz, Mexico. I grew up in the outsides of Charlotte, North Carolina. Coming out was it wasn't hard for me. My parents were not very religious. We grew up Catholic, being from Mexico, so I went to church with my friends. Growing up in North Carolina was a little hard because I was trying to hide who I was for most of the years in high school. I always knew I was different. That was something that was always in the back of my mind. I didn't have girlfriends. I had girlfriend for a long time, for about all throughout high school. I just tried to be my normal, or what I thought it was normal. So a little bit of my backstory. After graduating from high school, I started working as an electrician with my parents. It was not something I enjoyed. I didn't like getting dirty. It was not for me. Then after that, I ventured into being the restaurant business, but I was not good at it either. I was just a terrible waiter, the worst you can think of. I always forgot things. I dropped plates. But that time, I had gone on an audition in LA, and for a singing competition, Mexican singing, kind of like the American Idol version, but the Mexican version. And after I came back from LA, I just decided that I was going to be myself and I wasn't going to hide who I was. So I was working with my mom, I remember, and the sad thing about Mexican culture is that they pick derogatory, they called you fag, or they called you, puto, and they use it as slang, but my parents have been saying it to me, to my cousins, to each other, like, for many years. And I guess it was just my breaking point. And my mom had made a comment to me, say, like, after your trip, you're acting like you're she said, I remember her words, she said, pareces más puto, and that just kind of triggered me. And then I turned around and I was like, yeah, so what if I am? And then her facial expressions and her reaction was not what I expected. I always thought that she knew about me being gay because, I would pick her dresses for her. I would try to do her hair and her makeup and for parties, and I could have sworn that she knew, and it was just a big shock. What I was scared of, I was always afraid of my dad's reaction, but turned out that he was actually cooler than my mom, and he didn't mind at all. My mom was a little dramatic. She was like, oh, you probably have demons inside you. I'm going to kill myself. This is not what I want for you. You're not my son. So she went through that for a couple months. And then, I guess my dad really talked to her, and he let her know that, not to push me away because he didn't want us to have a strange relationship. And then soon enough, she came around. Then I decided to push the envelope a little bit more, and I always been a performer, so I started going to clubs, and I always like singing, so I started performing a Latino night, which had also a drag night in Charlotte. It was called Scándalos back then, so I started performing as a boy, singing my little karaoke songs, and people liked it. Then I started wearing, doing my own costumes, more like a showy, and then people were loving it. But the thing was that the owner of the club, he wasn't giving me as many bookings, and he was not giving me an opportunity to really show my talent and give me a spot on the casting, give me a spot on the performers, with the performers. So they did an annual drag competition. Well, it's not a drag competition, talent competition, and it was I enter it, and then I got second place. So a drag queen beat me by 1 point. So that just kind of triggered me. And I was like, okay, so you guys want me to be a drag queen? I'm gonna show you that I can be a drag queen. And then that's how I started my drag career. I went over to a friend's who was a really well-known drag queen. She had won many pageants, and she was like, you know what, you want to come over and just have some fun with makeup? And I was like, okay. Before I was like very like trying to hide who I was and try not to be feminine at all and try to be as manly as possible. And that night just pretty much changed my life. Like it was one of those moments where you just kind of do your makeup and you don't see it to the end result. And then when I went to that bathroom and looked at myself in the mirror, I was like, okay, I guess I can do this. I guess I look pretty enough to be a drag queen, and that just kind of started the whole thing.
All right, make some noise for Francis Ray one more time.
I went on to doing drag for a couple years. The following year, I entered the competition again, and then I won. I finally won. I got my first drag queen crown. That was pretty awesome. And soon enough, I met this guy, and we moved in together. He was my first real relationship. It was just kind of like everything happened so fast, and I kind of stopped doing drag. I started working with him, and it became kind of like a toxic relationship. Then, but before I met him, I went to Atlanta for New Year's, and that's where I met my husband, Chris. I had a friend who he was like, you know what, you guys want to go to Atlanta for New Year's? I believe it was like 2011. And I was like, okay, let's go. I didn't have any plans, and I believe it was a weekend. And he's like, yeah, there's this guy, he's a white guy, he's moving, he's letting us stay at his house, but we just have to help him pack, and he's having a yard sale, and he's going to let us stay with him for free, and all we have to do is just help him out. And I was like, okay. So a bunch of us just went. We packed our stuff in the car, and we had a road trip from Charlotte to Atlanta. It's like 4 hours, so it was a fun road trip. We get to the house, and then I see this guy. He was making kind of like really sarcastic and dark humor jokes, and almost sexual too. And I was like, who does this guy think he is? Like, I just met you. Like, you can't just talk to somebody like that. You don't act like that around people. And then, he took us out to dinner. He had a boyfriend back then, and I was single. But then, he moved here to Minneapolis, and then we kind of stayed in touch, like through Facebook. Facebook was not as popular back then. But then, he would send me messages like, hey, how you doing? And then when I had problems with my relationship or my boyfriend at the time, he would be like, all so encouraging and giving me words of advice, and, try not to be so explosive, because that seemed to be like my problem all the time. And I remember he was always very generous. He sent me, I had gotten in a fight with my boyfriend then, and I just wanted to go home because we lived in South Carolina, and like an hour and 30 minutes from Charlotte, and I didn't have any gas money, so he sent me money to, just to go back home. And I always appreciated that, and I didn't think nothing of it. And then a year and a half passed by, and then he just, out of the blue one day, I was in this I was, I guess not a midlife crisis, but I was just going through some things, and I was just, hanging out with the wrong people. Started drinking, not like an alcoholic, but going out partying all the time. And I just stopped myself, and I was like, this is not what I want. And I remember this like it was yesterday. I remember I'm a firm believer that if you pray, there is a God, or whatever you believe in, and energy, and whatever you ask in the universe, it comes back. So I remember I was like really sad, and I started crying, and I was like, God, if I'm not gonna have a family and a husband and kids, then I just don't wanna live. I just don't wanna be here. Like, give me a purpose. I wanna do something with my life. And then, sure enough, 2 weeks later, I get a message from from my husband Chris, and he's like, "Hey Frankie, how you doing? I always thought you were so cute. I was like, how's Washington D.C.? 'Cause for some reason I thought that he lived in Washington D.C. And he's like, Washington? No. He's like, I live in Minneapolis. He's like, you should come visit. And I was like, yeah, totally. And then I get another message from him, like I guess over the weekend. I don't know. He might have been drunk or he got some type of courage that he was like, I always thought you were so cute. Would you ever go on a date with me? And then I didn't. I paused myself and I was like, is he joking? Like I always saw him as somebody very respectful. He was always very ambitious and successful, and I was at a bad place in my life. I didn't feel good about myself, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna give him a chance. He must see something in me that he likes, obviously. So I went for it, and it was just kind of like out of a movie. He's like, okay, where would you like to go? He's like, pick anywhere you want to go. Las Vegas, you want to meet in New York, you want to go, to Atlanta. And I was like, seriously? He's like, yeah. He's like, I'm ready to start dating again. And I'm like, okay, well, I was like, I'll pick New York City. He's like, why New York? And I'm like, because I love Sex in the City, and the fashion and the people and everything is, New York. I always wanted to live there. In high school I did drama, so my plan was to go out and once I graduated and take New York by storm. But it turns out life is not like that, actually. So so I picked New York, and then he sent me over the flight information the next day, and I was just like, I told my friends, and they were like, well, be careful because you don't really know him. I told my mom, I was like, Mom, do you, Chris, remember the guy that I told you about the house and in Atlanta, and then that he moved? And then she was like, yeah. I'm like, he asked me on a date, and she was like, I'm just letting you know, just in case anything happens, so you know where I am, and that I'm safe. And she's like, yeah, go for it. So I did, and then we met in New York City. We had the best date out of a movie that you can think of. Like, we went to see Wicked, the musical, and that was just amazing. He had a limo. It was very like Mr. Big, and I was Carrie, and he made me feel like I was Carrie Bradshaw. Like, I see pictures and I see memories from that time, and it was magical and wonderful. I remember we went to Central Park and we did a walk around it, and he started asking me right off the bat, like, what are your goals in life? What do you do? I told him I was a hairstylist. I wanted to, have a family, get married, and have kids. And I remember he got a look in his face, and he's like, well, how are you gonna do that? How do you plan on doing that? And I was like, well, I talked to my sister Kayla. We've always been really close. It's just the two of us, so we're five years apart, and we would tell each other everything, and we're super close. And he's like, oh, okay. I'm like, she said she would carry the baby for me if I ever want to have kids with my partner or whoever I married. And I'm like, hopefully if whoever I married, they have a sister too, so they can carry the other side. And he was like, oh, okay. And that just kind of, I guess, stuck with him. And I guess it might have made he liked what he heard, because we started dating like long distance, and we met over in Atlanta, and then I was working as a hairstylist, and then I was working for 2 weeks, and then traveling here to Minneapolis for 2 weeks and going back and forth. And I believe my birthday weekend, I love birthdays, celebrating birthdays, so I would make a big deal, even back then. Like, I just like to go out and dress up and just not throw a party, but just, it was my birthday. I just love birthdays. That's just my thing. And he said that he wanted to invite my family over to Miami, because we would always go to Miami around my birthday and just celebrate. And my cousins and aunts from Mexico that we hadn't seen in years, their visa got approved, so they were gonna meet us in Miami. And then he just decided that he was gonna fly down there too and meet us all there. And I didn't know this, that he had talked to my sister, and he had sent my mom a letter that he wanted to propose and get married. And it was kind of fast because we were only dating for like 4 months, and you know, but I just knew that he was the one, and he knew that I was the one, and it just happened so fast. He proposed the day after my birthday, July 26th, and of course I said yes. I moved in with him here in Minneapolis shortly after. We got married in October, and everything just happened so quick, and that is like so crazy that I'm gonna write a book one day about it, because it's a really, really interesting story. And then we just got married shortly after. He was always like, a go-getter. We started looking for surrogates, and we didn't know anything about the process. We didn't know how to start. We didn't even know where to go. We didn't know anybody that had kids through surrogacy. So he just a brilliant man. He Googled it. He researched it. He had a full-time job while he was looking for the surrogates, the clinics, the clinic, all that, and he did it. And it took us 2 years to get the whole process together and find the surrogates, find the clinic. It was a journey for sure. Shortly after, we had complications with his side of the sperm, from his sperm and the egg donor, because for some reason, we don't know if the clinic messed up or it was just because genetics, but none of the embryos took. So they just kept, the surrogate just kept having miscarriage after miscarriage, and it was just very like heartbreaking, because we were down to the last 2 embryos. And then we decided to go with my side and just go ahead and find another surrogate. And kind of like the doctor advised us to separate the embryo, so that way if we knew if there was a problem, we would know where the problem came from. So we ended up getting 2 surrogates. So the first surrogate got pregnant with Chloe, and then shortly after, hers took right away, healthy baby. And then we go to the clinic again for the other side, the other half, and the doctor's like, well, we're down to the last 2 embryos. This is a Hail Mary pass. They could one take or both take. We don't know. So, she's like, I recommend we do the 2 embryos and just see what happens. And then we both decided to do that. And, sure enough, 6 weeks later, we go in for the ultrasound, and then we see 2 yolk sacs, and the doctor's like, okay, so I guess they both took. You guys are having twins. And yeah, it wasn't a shock for me, because I knew what I wanted, and I was ready. I was like, okay, I'm ready to have kids. And when I told my mom, she was like, what, are you guys crazy? Are you out of your mind? Like, you have no idea, like, don't be having kids like that. She freaked out. She was like, it takes so much to raise a kid, give him attention and all that. And it was just crazy, like, her reaction. She's always been a little dramatic, hence when I came out. Da-da. Da-da. Uh-oh, be careful. Alright, we have to get ready for the day. So I guess I'll take Christian to his appointment.
Yeah.
But she was supportive, and everybody started to be supportive. And so the Chloe and the twins are 3 months apart, but everywhere we go, I just tell them that they're triplets, because I don't have time to sit down and explain to the old ladies and the grocery store that they came through surrogacy, or they 3 months apart. And sometimes they see my sister, and they're like, oh, you look really good to have 3 kids, triplets. And my sister just laughs, because I'm like, there's no point of just explaining to them our situation and our story. So everybody always was like, oh, you should do a reality show with your life, 3 kids, and it's so interesting that how do you manage and all this, and be I had told my husband about documenting our journey through surrogacy because I wanted to shine light on that side. So we do have a lot of footage of the surrogates and their sit downs and when they were pregnant, for our baby shower, because we wanted to do like a documentary. So yeah, we have that for the future. Who knows what could happen? I might show you guys. So yeah, the twins were born. Chloe was born. Then the twins were born, and everything was going fine. Life happens, and my husband's work started getting complicated. It just became too much for him. He started to stress. His mom got really sick she had melanoma cancer. She was diagnosed with cancer, and so my husband was like, he wasn't taking care of himself. He had sleep apnea, and he a year ago he said that he needed to go see his mom in Louisiana, and because he didn't think that she was gonna last much longer, so we were all planning on going, and something just happened to where we had the twins party, and it just wasn't gonna be possible, and he just flew down there, and he spent a few days with his mom, and we always joke. My husband was very sarcastic. He always he loved to play pranks and joke with people, like very crude. He would always say, "Aren't you dead yet?" Or like, "Oh, I hope you die," and comment like that, but like in a sarcastic type of way. So I had talked to him the night before, and I was like, 2 nights prior, like I couldn't sleep. I was just like, we were just used to each other, sleeping next to each other, that it was just so hard for me to sleep. Every time he was away or on a work trip, or I went away to see my family, and I just couldn't sleep. And I told him the next day, I'm like, I couldn't sleep last night. It was just so weird. And he's like, yeah, me neither. And I'm like, well, hurry up and get home. So the following day, I didn't hear from him. I'd never been the type that, would call him or FaceTime him to see what he's doing. So we always gave each other our space. And yeah, I remember waking up that morning, and he would always text me like, "Good morning, Prince. I love you. I hope you have a wonderful day." He was supposed to get on a flight to come home, and it was just weird that I didn't hear from him. So I texted him. I was just like, "Hey, babe, are you alive?" And no response. And then I took the kids to the mall, and when we came back, I get a knock on the door from the police saying that if I knew Chris Reed, and then they had found him in his hotel, that he had passed away through a previous pre-existing condition, and that was just a big shock. Going from finding the love of your life to having kids to losing